All right. Today, on today's coach, we have David Young, someone I feel very blessed and fortunate to have met in the LinkedIn world of all places. I want to shoot it over to you before we get going, just to quickly introduce yourself and what it is you do.
Oh yeah, thanks, MJ. Appreciate you having me on. So I coach coaches on LinkedIn who have a little bit smaller followings, less than 3,000 followers, who are looking to grow their business. So I work with them on creating better content, which is going to get more people into their ecosystem, so people know what they do, optimizing their profile, turning their profile into a landing page, and then ultimately outreach and conversion tactics to convert those potential leads into clients. So it's all about growing their business. 90-day coaching program. I try to turn you into a LinkedIn expert in a pretty short period of time.
Amazing. Speak from firsthand experience, the type of support we all need. And I think it's amazing that you target the people with smaller followings because I think it can feel like a pretty intimidating place when you first get on there and you see the people with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands followers. And it's like, how do you even get there? And I think sometimes you can get really caught up in what everyone else is doing and losing sight of what are you doing consistently day out of day that you feel good about. I'm curious, what have you seen as some of the biggest hurdles or roadblocks that clients with under 3,000 followers, kind of as they're starting out, are facing?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is you made a good point about the bigger creators. We do have a tendency to try to follow what's worked for the bigger creators. That typically won't work for smaller creators. They can get away with a lot more simply because they have the big followings. So kind of following their templates or their blueprint will typically lead to more frustration than good outcomes. So the biggest thing I see is that people really struggle with a long-term content plan. They know they should be creating content. They know they should be building awareness around whatever they're coaching, however they're helping people. They don't really know a great way to do that. So they end up just kind of posting whatever. And then, some of it does well, some of it doesn't. It's a little bit all over the place. So it's very hard for new people to come in and resonate with the content and actually see like, oh, this person actually would be a fit for me. And so they struggled with, there's a disconnect between that. So that's why we usually start with a content strategy, a very specific strategic content plan. That's like, all right, so it takes the worry off the table of like, what should I even be talking about? Then you know what you should be talking about. Now you just have to create the post. The other thing I do with all my clients is I edit their posts so they can send them to me after they write them, and I will edit them. Typically, I don't change a lot, but it's usually just formatting, making it easier to read. I might rewrite the hook a little bit, depending. Um, so I offer that because especially getting started, if you haven't learned the way to write content, it's a little bit of a nuanced process. It's not simply just, paragraph, 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 enter, done. There's more to it. It's not, people kind of struggle with that. Yeah, it's really trying to figure out how to connect your message with what you do with people out there who need it. So that's kind of where we start. Content, I think of it as like kind of base camp of everything, and then it builds from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, firsthand or just people I've spoken with, I think it can feel daunting. Like, what am I going to write about? How am I going to write about something? And there's this like unspoken pressure to like recreate the wheel every day. I heard someone say once, it's like, you should be sick of the content you're sharing. And that's a sign that you're actually posting about it as frequently as you should. Like, I'm curious how you feel about that sentiment.
Yeah, especially if you have an offer. If you're actively selling a product or service, and most of the people I work with are selling a service, you have to talk about it way more than you think you need to talk about it. Simply because not everybody's seeing all of your posts. We live in a world where we think that every time we post, everyone is seeing it and reading every word of it, and that's just simply not the case. People are coming in and out. They're scamming it. They're skimming it, and then they're moving on to other posts and other social media. We're living with it because we're writing it, thinking about it, posting it, and then we're commenting on it. So it's very present with us. But for most people, they're with it for a very short period of time, and then like they're going on. So they're not really withdrawal. So you have to be repetitive because they need to see the message like over and over. Like very few people will see one piece of content, resonate with it, and be like, "Oh, I want to hire you." Like it just doesn't work that way. So yeah, you do really have to be a broken record with your offer, how you help, the transformation, what do people get out of it. They invest in you, and say you have a 90 or 180-day offer. Like what is the difference? Like how are they different on day 91 or day 181 than they were, at the beginning? So you're really painting that picture. You're kind of helping them understand like what they're getting when they work with you. But yeah, it's a good point about being sick of it. Like it should and will feel quite redundant if you're doing it correctly, because that's how you get people to know. You have to become known for what you do, and that's the only way to do it is talk about it a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's interesting, even as you're sharing that, I'm thinking of Anna Ludmanowski, who I had on last week, a business strategist, and we talked about how difficult it can be to get clarity for ourselves about what we have to offer and what that looks like. And maybe that partially contributes to our tendency to just kind of post shallow content or like little excerpts here or there, or struggle with bringing it all together in a coherent fashion. Like, I'm curious if you have any advice for people in terms of a why that clarity is important in terms of what is my offer, what is the difference that people can expect, what do I have to contribute, and also the best ways of kind of communicating that to people.
Yeah, so I think to your first point, I think it's important why almost should always have some type of coach, no matter where you are in the journey, because it's always much easier for people on the outside to look in because we're emotionally tied to it. We're thinking about it all the time. We can kind of get tunnel vision in our own stuff. And so when you have that outside perspective, they can look at something quickly and be like, oh yeah, like what you're writing here, like this isn't clear. It doesn't make sense. And you're like, oh wow, I thought that was crystal clear. Because to me, like it is, but the way that I've said it or the way you've said it to the outsider is like, I don't actually know what you're talking about here. So it's just important, kind of no matter where you are, just to have that outside perspective. In terms of clarity of message, first thing you have to do is identify your long-term goals. So creating content and running an online business is a long-term endeavor. So it isn't just about what you're going to do in this month or next month. Like you have to be thinking much farther down the road. So what is your plan in terms of what message are you sending? What are people going to, how long, it's going to take people a while to resonate with the message. So it's not just creating a content plan for like the next 2 weeks. It's like the next 2 months and then 2 months after that, like again, long term. Now that will repeat. It's not like you said, going to come up with a different piece of content every time. You typically will have two or three things that you're talking about, and you're just going to talk about those over and over in slightly different ways. But I even try to get people to, when I start asking questions in terms of their business, is it's very important to know who you're trying to target. So some people have businesses, but they're like, I work with everyone. I can help everyone. Well, that might be true, and you might be capable of that, but it's very hard to write a message that appeals to everyone. So it's really about reining that in and be like, all right, well, let's just pick one or two. So then you're writing specific content for like whoever you're thinking about, because then it's easier for you to identify them, and it's also easier for them to identify you as a potential solution. From there, it's about what problems are they having, why do they need a coach, why do they need you. So then you're bringing those to light. It's also important to tie the emotion. Because typically there's frustration, there's things that aren't happening, and so what's the emotion like in that? And then you're writing content. Part of your content is positioning yourself as a solution to alleviate like that frustration. So it's again, you're thinking about the different journey, where people are, and then the different ways you can talk about what you do that ultimately paints that clear picture that you're the solution for like, whatever they're facing.
Okay, another question that comes to mind, thinking about early stages, starting to post, is how quickly we can get sucked into the analytics of it all, right? Like, again, it will become about how many likes am I getting? How many comments am I getting? How many reposts? And I've seen and I've experienced it personally, like that clear tunnel vision of what I'm doing and who I'm trying to do it for be sideswiped by this desire to like get more likes or get more engagement. And a lot of that is driven often by seeing what's happening with other people who maybe started out around the same time as you and their engagement is taking off. And I'm curious because I imagine that is a challenge that many people would face early on. How do you help people overcome that?
So yeah, there's a nuanced answer to that question. It's a good one. When you're first starting out, that is important because you will not get clients if you're posting and you're getting 2 likes and 1 comment and like 500 impressions. Like it's very difficult to build a business because you're just not simply getting enough visibility. So you do need to figure out like how can I get more impressions? How can I get more people to engage with my content? And that's a combination of just quality content consistently. And then also there's things to do with the algorithm to try to make sure it gets boosted and people like are seeing it. It's kind of part one. There is a certain point though where continuing to play that game becomes diminishing returns. Like you'll get that to a certain level and then it doesn't really matter. The next part of that then is outreach. And this is by far the biggest mistake. I won't say mistake. I guess the biggest thing I was too slow to adopt, which is being more consistent than what I would call like warm outbound messaging. And it isn't pitching, it's not selling, but it's just being more active in more connection requests, setting more DMs, asking more questions about people's struggles and their business, and positioning yourself as a resource to help, which ultimately could eventually lead to them becoming a client. I was too reliant on inbound leads because I got quite a few at the beginning. It was either people I knew from posting or just straight inbound. So I was like, well, this will kind of be that way, like consistently. And it was for a few months, but then it dried up, and then I didn't have a backup. So then I was kind of stuck. And then the light bulb kind of went off like, oh, that really should be a supplement. Like the inbound and the referrals and the people you know should be a supplement to your outbound strategy. Again, more so at the beginning. You can get to the point where you're like well known enough and you have enough testimonials and results and people just know you as like, oh yeah, I work with that person. You can certainly get to that point. You don't have to do much outbound then because people are just will come to you, but that's hard to, it takes a while to build that up. So at the beginning, to really help kind of speed everything up, it's like doing more just outbound, letting people know like what you do, how you help, and if they have a problem that you can solve or potentially solve, and also letting them know that. So yeah, it depends where you are in the journey. It is, I mean, I pay a lot of attention to the analytics, mostly because I really like it and I love numbers and spreadsheets, but that won't drive your business. That can help guide you, but it won't single-handedly just start bringing in leads.
Okay, so it's interesting because again, this whole idea of outbound, I think for people who are coming into the space relatively new, uncomfortable to a certain extent with their voice being heard, and now asking them to like reach out to other people, I imagine there's a bit of resistance around that. Do you have any tips on how to reframe, like how you think about it or approach it, that would maybe feel a little less daunting than, do you want my business? Because we all know we all get those messages and they drive us nuts. So what's your advice there?
Yeah, people are terrified when I tell them that they're gonna have to do more outbound. They want to just post and watch the leads come in, and which would be great. And it does happen sometimes, but you can't build a sustainable long-term business on that. Not at the beginning. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not a cold DM. You'll see a lot of people say send 50 cold DMs a day. You can do that. I don't do it. I've never done it, and I don't advocate for people to do that. That is one strategy. It's a numbers game. The more you send, eventually people say yes. I'm more of like, if people are viewing your profile, if they're connecting with you, if they're reacting to your post, engaging on your post, that type of stuff, like that's general signals of interest in whatever you're doing. I'm reaching out to those people. And again, I'm not pitching them, but I'm thanking them for whatever they did. And then asking maybe questions about what they're working on or what those struggles are. And then I usually tell them like, I help kind of new or early stage coaches grow. So I'm kind of upfront about like what I do. So it's not a surprise if we move the call or move the messaging to a point. So it's more than just like, hey, how's it going? Like that's not really doing anything. I mean, it's better than nothing, but that's not typically going to lead the potential business. Like you're kind of setting that stage up front. Now, I will say it took me a while to get to that point. Like 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't even have done that. But now I'm confident enough because I've worked with enough people and I know that I can help. So I'm much more confident. In terms of your question about how to position it, I've seen people talk about this a lot. Thinking of selling as a service. So you're not selling. I mean, there's always an exchange, right? Like anything that we consume, right? We're giving money in exchange for a product or service. So we all know that that's how it's going to go. But you're not thinking about selling your service. It's my service can help this person do X. So I'm thinking of it as what I am charging them is going to, in this time frame, however long we work together, is going to move them to this, I mean, typically a much better spot than where they are. So that's so the investment is for the transformation. So thinking of it more of like, if you're coaching, you have an expertise, you're helping someone, you're using your expertise to help someone speed up the process, right? Because we're always paying with money or time. So they don't spend money with you. They might be able to figure it out themselves, but how long will that take them? And then how much will that cost them? Or they can pay someone to come in and do it, and it happens much faster, right? So you have to think of it like that. It's hard to get into that headspace. I think it takes some confidence to start
Mhm.
thinking that way. That's kind of, I've seen a lot of people talk about that, and it's not new information, but I do think it's a good reframe. Or you're not selling, you're helping.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and along the same note, I remember hearing about networking not being hunting, but more like farming, right? So, like, I'm not trying to go
Yeah.
hold the sale. Like, I'm not trying to get the person and drag their carcass back. Like, I'm planting a seed and I'm going to nurture it. And I think part of that is also understanding that it takes time, which can require patience. And sometimes when we're early starting out, like, we're so eager to get those quick wins, or we're in a place where we're kind of looking at it from a scarcity mindset, like, I got to get the money, I got to get the money. And I feel like people can sense that. Like, people sense that energy, right? Like, I'm not sure if you have any advice there in terms of maybe the importance or the value of kind of practicing patience and having that big picture vision and not getting sucked into, what hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I mean, it can be tricky, especially if you're reliant on the money and like you need the money to pay bills and you go a couple months without signing clients and then you're like, oh crap. Obviously that can be very challenging in terms of to stop thinking about the money, because then you're just like you said, when you start focusing on the money and selling, like you said it, people feel the energy. It comes from a place of like neediness, and that typically is a turnoff. I mean, indifference is one of the great sales strategies. My first job, I don't know if I call it a job. They paid me, so we'll call it one anyway. But I sold advertising door to door. So we
Mhm.
sold these cards. They were like laminate, cardboard cards, right? But they were for like, so they were $20, and if you bought one, you got discounts at places like golf courses, car care places, restaurants, whatever, right? So it was marketing for them. And one of the like tricks that we used was just simply not caring. Like we would say like it's $20. Like it's not a lot of money. Like if you want to save money at this place, like great. If you don't, your neighbor will. Like I don't care. And if you could do that, well, people would buy from you simply because they didn't think you wanted them to buy. Whereas if you were like pushing for the $20, it's like, oh, this guy really wants me to give him $20. I'm not going to do it. So it's almost like a reverse psychology. So if you can somehow like tap into that, even for much larger, higher ticket, people are selling obviously, thousands and thousands of dollars. Coaching services, like you paint yourself as a solution to their problem, and then it's up to them. And if they don't want to do it, like that's great. If they do, that's also great. Like you just have to get to a place where you're not really thinking about the money, because I mean, yeah, the money is important, but if people can feel that you're there for the right reason, it's much easier to want to give you thousands of dollars than like, oh, this guy really needs thousands.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good point. Okay, one more question that comes to mind again for the newer creators. Video, video
Yeah.
content, comfort with being on video. So we've just started writing content. We're maybe not fully comfortable there. And now we're like, and also post pictures of yourself and shoot videos. I know I've spoken with many people who struggle with the notion of being in front of the camera and recording themselves. Do you have any tips when it comes to that?
Yeah, I mean, the video's gone crazy with the video feed that they've added to a lot of people's mobile LinkedIn feeds. I don't know. I think it's like anything. You don't have to jump in with, you don't have to go into the deep end with 2 feet. If you don't want to do video, don't do video. Like, I don't think it's mandatory. If you can do it, does it help? Probably a little, because people like to see and hear you. And the thing about doing business with you, it kind of, you know, humanizes you a little bit more. If they've never seen or heard you anywhere else, right now they can hear your voice and see your face, they feel your energy. But at the same time, I wouldn't force it. So if you're much more comfortable writing text posts, then I would write text posts. I haven't done a lot of video myself. I've done several. They don't perform as well for me as my text posts do. None of them ever have. I promote my podcast once a week, and so that I do a video promo for that, but it's usually the guest is doing most of the talking. I occasionally will talk. I don't know if that's probably not the best data point. So I think it's like a lot of things. Like it's experimenting. It'll be different from different people. It doesn't have to be. What I do know is it doesn't have to be super professional. You can record it on your phone. You don't really have to edit it. Recorder's 60 seconds or less, and it's a quick one hit. It's a quick hitter, one message, talking about it. Get in, wrap it up, and get out, and then post it and see. So it doesn't. I think a lot of people get caught up on like perfecting it or doing a bunch of takes or having to have like professional editing. I mean, there's certain people out there that do that. And if you get your business to a certain level, maybe it's worth an investment. But I think for most people, especially the newcomers, like I might do 1 month, do a month, if that. Like I just don't know. But I mean, some people will swear by it, and I've actually seen recent posts that people are saying they've switched to all video, like they're doing 5 days a week and 5 videos. So I don't know. I think it just also depends on your business.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, listen, I think this is another challenge that many earlier presents experience is there's such an overwhelm of you should have this, you should do that. So as you're saying, like professional video editing, ghostwriters, like it's unbelievable how many messages we'll get to our inbox about all of the people that care for all of the different things and all of the platforms we should be using and all the apps that we should be using, and it can quickly become this overwhelming thing of like, okay, this is a lot. And I honestly think for some people that is enough to make them step away because it's just almost like analysis paralysis, right? I'm curious from your perspective, given you work with people in their relatively earlier stages of building their brands, what do you think is the most important place for them to start, or the things that they should focus on first amidst all the chaos?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of messaging for like all the things, and I mean, it's like anything else. No matter what you're, no matter what you're doing, you have to start with the fundamentals or the basics. Like we talked about the drums earlier, post about the drums, right? Like you're not gonna start playing like John Bonham in 2 weeks, right? Like that's not possible.
Yeah.
So how about we start with some basics, just like
Yeah.
some intro, and whether it's sports or music or paint, it doesn't matter. Like so, start small and then build. So like if you're a new coach or a new creator, that's why I start with content because it's relatively simple. In a short period of time, you can learn to write at least decent content and then post that at least 3 times a week, 5 times if you can, but you don't have to do five. Three is good, consistency. And then it's creative, like the writing process, creative. You'll come up with the more you write, the more you can write, the more ideas you start generating. Typically, the more ideas you have, you get feedback on your content that gives you more post ideas. So it all kind of feeds, and then you build your confidence in content, start getting people to like know you exist. That's the hardest part is getting people to know that you're here. Like if you can't sell anything if no one knows you exist. So that's where content comes into play. From there, then you can move to your profile. Nobody's gonna see if your content's not any good. Nobody's gonna see your profile. So, I wouldn't worry about my profile if I'm not posting because no one's gonna see it. Once you start getting people that are like regularly visiting and coming into your orbit, then you start working on that, and then you start working on outbound. So to me, it's like a three-step content, profile, outbound. It's like a three-step, three-pronged approach to start moving it forward. But like anything else, it takes time and practice, and that's why hiring somebody, not necessarily me, but anyone, to speed the process up, because otherwise it's gonna take you forever to try to figure it out, where you're just trial and erroring it.
Yeah, yeah. Great use of the I don't care approach there when you said, doesn't have to be me. I mean, whatever.
Practicing what I preach.
Lovely. No, no, just kidding. Okay, a little segue here. I may regret this immediately, but I did send you some of my analytics for my
Yeah.
LinkedIn. So, full disclaimer, I've been posting since I think about March of last year, relatively consistently. But a full disclosure, not with much guidance or clarity in terms of why I'm posting. I work a lot with my clients, one-on-one group training. I do some keynotes. So for me, it's been about just being in the space and starting to meet some people. I would like to probably get a bit more intentional about what I'm posting and how I'm posting moving forward. But I did send you my numbers. And if we could, I thought it would be really cool for you to kind of walk me through the sort of thing you may walk a prospective client through.
Sure. Do you want me to share or you just want to talk about it? Yeah. So what I did for you is we did all of December, and you had 20, posted quite a bit, 29 times in December. And then we did 10 for November. And then we did the first part of this year, which is another 12. So that's about 50 or so posts. I did take out your one. I had one more up here. This one, that was semi-viral for you. That had 32,000, but that wasn't even semi-viral. That was viral. So you had 32,000 impressions and threw off all your numbers. So I just took that out. Otherwise, it was gonna look really odd because it was such an outlier. Yeah. So the first thing I noticed is it seems like you do post twice a day sometimes. Is that true?
When I feel like it, I suppose. No rhyme or reason.
Um,
Yeah.
so that will typically hurt your impressions. So one post every 24 hours is kind of the best, I guess, way to do it. Typically, when you post a second time, it will greatly suppress impressions of the second post, and will also suppress impressions of your first post. Um, again, doesn't necessarily mean you don't like to stop doing it, but that post will typically not do as well just because. So I usually just recommend like once a day and kind of at the same time if your life and schedule allows it.
Okay, so that's
Um,
to start with because I was posting at the same time pretty consistently for a while. And then over this time period you've calculated for, it's been all over the place and like not at ideal times because I've just been trying to get it in. But what you're
yeah.
saying is it actually is quite beneficial to be consistent because I would say the months prior to this, my engagement, comments, all of that were up as well. So,
So yeah, typically if you can, again, with your life and schedule, if you can be on around the same time on the days that you post, so even if it's 3 days a week, but if you can do it on the same days around the same time, that will help you. If you can engage a little bit before the post goes live, like say 10 minutes, and comment on other people's posts, then post live, go and post yours live, don't schedule it. And once yours is live, it'll take a little while, usually 5 or 10 minutes before people start to engage with it. In that time, like don't just sit and wait for that to happen. Go back out into the feed and start and keep commenting on other people's posts. Then as reactions and comments start coming in on yours, try to respond to those first 3 to 5 comments kind of as quickly as you can. And that just helps. It just helps boost the post and the algorithm and gets more visibility. Again, you don't have to do this for hours. It could be 30 minutes, but just that kind of sequence of events will help you in terms
okay.
of getting people to see it. So
Time
that
would recommend with
7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time is, I think they call it the golden window or prime window. If you can hit that, great. If you can't, that's fine. I would rather see someone if you can't be on live at that time, but you could be on live, say at 2 p.m. Eastern. I would rather see you do it live at 2, where you can be on and do the actual engagement strategy versus like posting it at say 8 a.m. scheduled. You can't be on for 6 more hours. I would not do that. So I would do it when you can be there. But ideally, you can be on live in that Eastern time zone window. But obviously, a lot of people can't based on a variety of factors. Um, yeah. So what we noticed with yours, so like your reactions were up 5% in December based on November, but your comments and impressions were down. But the good part is when your impressions go down, your engagement goes up because you're dividing. The way you calculate engagement rate is you add reactions and comments total and then divide that by impressions. So when that denominator for the impressions is smaller, and then obviously the number goes up because you're dividing it by a less number. So your engagement went up. And then in this month, um, reactions are down 20%, but your comments have gone up. And then impressions are down, but impressions are down for everyone. Like yours are down 20% in December. They're now down 30% so far in January, but that's common from what I see in my own data and what I just hear other people talk about. It's just kind of what LinkedIn's doing right now. There's just less organic reach. Part of it is, I think, the holidays. Probably this week, you'll probably get most of the people back, but they're still not everyone's back. But yeah, I would say if you could get back, if you can, to more consistent posting once a day, engaging before and after, I think that would help kind of tighten up your numbers.
nice. I appreciate that. That totally makes sense to me. Now, of these numbers, which ones do you think are most important?
Well, again, it does depend on what you're doing. So if you're trying to use your content to sign clients, then, you know, engagement rate, are people responding to what you're posting is kind of part one. Part two is not calculated or even looked at in this sheet, and that would be quality of so if people are sending you messages, so like inbound, not even necessarily leads, but if they're just sending you posts about or a message like I like that post or it resonated, quality of the connection requests. If you're getting connection requests, are they people you think you could work with? Are you seeing profile views go up? That type of stuff. So typically your content is driving all of that. So again, it's a little bit harder to, I mean, you could track it, but those numbers are smaller. It really is just more of a keeping an eye on it. So if you're starting to see increases in that, then you kind of know that your content's resonating, and then you can kind of take it from there. And that's why, again, if you are selling something, it's important to have different, you want to talk about yourself and your background, kind of who, what, why you do what you do. Then there's some tactics, some how to, and then there's client results. Those are kind of your very high level, but those are kind of your three pillars, for lack of a better term. So as long as you're hitting those consistently, like in your post, you're being consistent in what you're posting, and people are seeing a very similar message because your who, what, and why isn't going to change that much. How you're helping people isn't going to change that much. Testimonials will change depending on the client, but the results should be somewhat consistent. So that's a way to talk about the same thing, but you're doing it in slightly different ways over and over.
Cool, cool. Well, I think it's again, like it was really neat seeing that, even just to put the numbers together and notice the trends and what you're looking for. Listen, I'm very grateful for your time today, that you made time to talk with me to actually create that spreadsheet to help me understand. So my next steps are get back to consistent posting in terms of time of day and surrounding that with engagement, because I do think that probably does make a big difference. Also, maybe cutting back. I don't want to post every day. I think for me, maybe 4 times a week would be a good fit. So maybe I look to do that as well. So I really appreciate that. If anyone wants to find you, or if they have more questions from watching this and maybe they're considering jumping in and getting some support from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks for that. So LinkedIn's typically the best place to start. It's David Young. And then if you throw MBA after, because there's thousands, probably even more than that, of David Youngs but if you do MBA after my name, I'm typically the first that comes up. And then I have a relatively new landing page. It's davidjyoung.me, and that'll give you a similar information to what you see on LinkedIn, but in a slightly different format. So those are the two best ways. And usually start with a discovery call because I need to learn more about you and what you're doing and what your goals are to even see if what I do, is a fit, and we take it from there. So this is great. Thanks so much for having me on. Really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.